For over 50 years, some pretty famous characters have performed on the screen for Walt Disney Studios. Of course, they couldn't have done it without a little behind-the-screen help from artists like Marc Davis.
Really, an animator is basically an actor, but instead of having his own face in front of the camera, you have the character that you do. And the medium is that of drawing and painting, but it's with music, it's with acting, it's with dancing, it's all the arts combined in one performance.
Marc Davis's skills weren't confined to animation. He also designed many of Disneyland's three-dimensional characters.
It was interesting because I say this was, again, a different challenge. You know, I think that's the whole thing with creativity is, you know, if there's something new to do out there, why not give it a try?
What Marc Davis tried as an artist nearly always succeeded. His sense of design made every character he created unique. So it's time to part the curtain on his story in the Disney Family Album. Marc Davis is before all else an artist. Art is his work and his relaxation. His collection of New Guinea art is one of the finest in the world.
It has a vitality, shape and form. It has an inventiveness of design that is like no other art in the world, and is tremendously good design. And these things have a spiritual quality within them, that the man that carved these knew that these things were encasing a spirit.
In his own artwork, Marc Davis encases a life that began as the son of an oil worker, a life that provided an endless well of experiences.
Certainly to explore the field of acting and the field of animation, this thing of endless experience is really what your deck of cards is. These are what you deal on the table.
Although Walt Disney cartoons impressed Marc with their artistic sleight of hand, his career ambition was to duel with the masters.
My own ambitions, I suppose, when I was an art student was to outpaint Michelangelo and do another Sistine Chapel, you know. Well, they weren't buying many of those when I was right out of art school. But here was this cartoon business, and Walt Disney was advertising that he wanted artists. Then about maybe 6 months or so later, I came down to Los Angeles. Everybody said, well, why don't you go out and see Walt Disney? You know, he's hiring artists. So I did, and I was hired, and this was very fortunate that Walt Disney was just beginning to build his staff and studio to do feature films.
Marc broke into animation as an assistant on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1935.
Actually, the first scene that I ever animated that had my name on the exposure sheet was a scene of Snow White dancing.
For Marc, the road to becoming an animator began at the zoo.
One of the reasons that I came to the studio was that I was more or less expert in the drawing of animals. This is something that's been a fascination with me. I'd spent a great deal of time in zoos drawing. Matter of fact, sometimes I spent more time in zoos than animals, but what I tried to put in animals was to give them a bony structure, an anatomy within themselves. And I feel that all animated characters have some kind of a basic anatomy. And I think I brought some things into the studio that were a little different than anybody else.
Walt gave Marc a chance to put this expertise to work on Bambi, doing story sketches and designing the characters.
We were trying to do something that had not been done before, which was to do animals that were caricatures, but at the same time moved realistically.
For the next 3 years, Marc sketched out the story of Bambi.
I did, in story with George Stallings, the love sequence where the skunk falls in love. The thumper falls in love.
Hello.
And eventually, Bambi falls in love. I worked on the story for 3 years, and then Walt liked my drawing sufficiently that he said he wanted to see my drawings on the screen and to make an animator out of him. So I was put in with Milt Call and Frank Thomas, and they were told to teach him how to animate.
One of the first things Marc had to learn as an animator was staging.
Butterfly.
Staging is where you pick the right place to show something. An example of that was that I had something to do with in the staging of was Bambi meeting the skunk for the first time. And then he smells down and the skunk comes up right on the end of his nose. And he says, flower. And the skunk breaks up because he knows it is. And the rabbit breaks up because he knows it is.
Flower. Me?
And you stage this so that you see very definitely this is the back of a little skunk. If you did it from the front, it wouldn't work.
That's all right. He can call me a flower if he wants to.
After 6 years in the tranquil world of Bambi, Marc's next assignment was a shattering dose of reality. It came in the form of World War II. The Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor, and America declared war against the Axis. Walt Disney volunteered his creative team of artists to support the Allied effort, and he gave Marc the monumental task of turning Alexander Seversky's best-selling book, Victory Through Air Power, into an animated film.
Walt felt and agreed that Victory Through Air Power was the only way that we would accomplish victory, but also, we told the story through many different things. The Axis was represented by a couple of octopi, and I did a sequence on that. But there was no other medium that you could have done this.
Marc moved from the battle between eagle and octopus to the more comical struggle between rabbit and fox in Song of the South, Disney's classic combination of animation and live action.
You know, these were personalities that Uncle Remus told about, and he told about them as if they were people. But they happened to be a fox, they happened to be a rabbit, and they happened to be a bear. They all stood on their hind legs like humans. They had human personalities, yet they did certain things that were characteristic of the animal, in that the rabbit hopped and the fox would have eaten him, you know, all these things which were characteristically animal.
That biggity old rabbit won't get away this time. No, sir. Gonna catch him sure. I'll catch him sure.
That's what you said the last time before, and the time before that, and look. Let's just knock his head clean off.
Oh, no, indeed. Ain't nothing smart about that. I'm going to show
A key ingredient for an animator in giving these animals human personalities is voice.
Voices and the pattern of a voice has an awful lot to do with the interpretation of a character. Jim Basquette, who played Uncle Remus, did the Fox's voice, and he could run a tremendous gamut of height and low, fast and slow, and it gave you so many things to do with a character because you knew just exactly what was happening, or he could be very slow and sneaky. You see, there are these possibilities.
Oh, yes, indeed, eyes. I'm glad I thought of that. Let me see now. Let me see, just about this size. Now, let me see. Oh, yes, nose, too. Got to have a nose. Need one of those very, very badly. Got to have a nose. This is sure going to do the trick. Just looking more natural all the time.
Well,
it even began to fool me. You know what I'm saying?
It ain't got no hair.
Hair?
But now, don't...
Now. All right, come on, have it long. Come on. I ain't got all day. Come on.
Marc became one of the studio's most versatile animators, and after his successes with animal characters, he had designs on some very difficult women.
Strange thing was that they needed people who could draw well so badly that I got into the thing of having to do human characters, leading ladies, so to speak.
Please, wait for me.
Isn't it lovely? Do you like it? Do you think it will do?
Marc's first lady was Cinderella, and he soon realized that animating humans wasn't always a dream come true.
They're more difficult because the audience knows them better. We look at one another all the time. And so we're very critical when we look at one another. So when you put a human character on the screen, all of those things are right in play. If it's a little animal and people aren't that familiar, they still will be accepted. But the human character, no.
Marc's Cinderella animation proved him one of the studio's top artists, and one scene in particular had a special meaning for Walt.
Walt Disney had some guests at lunch one day, and somebody told me this story that one of them asked, said, Mr. Disney, of all the animations been done in your studio, what is your favorite piece of animation? And he thought for a moment. He said, I guess it would have to be when Cinderella got her ballroom gown, her dress. And now that doesn't mean that's the best piece of animation, but this is also a part of this magic that was Walt Disney, this belief that good things were going to happen, good things were there, and that's what this was.
Oh, just leave it to me. What a gown this will be. Bibbidi-bobbidi, bibbidi-bobbidi, bibbidi-bobbidi. Oh, it's a beautiful dress. Did you ever see such a beautiful dress? And look, glass slippers. Why, it's like a dream. A wonderful dream come true. Yes, my child.
Oh, that was lovely.
Marc's next leading lady nearly drove him mad.
Alice was a difficult character to do for the simple reason that here's a perfectly normal little girl thrown into what amounts to being a madhouse. I worked on the sequence, The Mad Hatter's Tea Party, and Ward Kimball did the Mad Hatter and the March Hare, and the Dormouse. He got to do the fun stuff, and we had to do, you do these things, and it's the supporting character, really. Yet, if those characters are not done well, then the whole film falls apart.
Why, it's a raven, like a writing desk.
Riddles? Let me see now. Why is a raven like a writing desk?
I beg your pardon.
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Why is a what?
Careful. She's stark raven mad.
But it's your silly riddle. You just said...
Don't get excited.
How about a nice cup of tea?
Have a cup of tea, indeed. Well, I'm sorry, but I just haven't the time.
The time! The time! Who's got the time?
Marc had a good time with his next character, Tinker Bell from Peter Pan. Originally, the story described her as a glowing ball of light, but Marc designed her as a sexy pixie.
That was a part of her character. She was jealous. She was a woman, and she was jealous of Wendy in his relationship with Peter Pan.
The fact that Tinkerbell didn't talk posed a unique problem for Marc.
I think it was an interesting one because really, again, she becomes a pure pantomime character. And, she could jingle and she could sparkle, but she showed all the physical attitudes of an angry girl.
Oh, Peter, you saved my life.
One of the things was she landed on the mirror and she was noticing that she was putting on too much weight. She kind of measured off the size of her hips. And you wanted to, the conclusion was that we wanted her to be cute and to be sexy.
From Tinkerbell to Sleeping Beauty, Marc's women each had their own individual style.
We had decided to do Sleeping Beauty as what Walt called a moving illustration. So we did a style in there that was different from any other Disney film. We stylized the drawing of Briar Rose. We stylized the drawing of Maleficent.
To help the stylized Briar Rose move realistically, Marc studied the movements of dancer Helene Stanley.
Well, we used live action to kind of set a pattern that a character would have through the film. What you do is kind of do your first rough scene of animation through a human being whom you would photograph. Then you look at this. Then you begin to develop your own character. But what happens on the screen is very different. You see no resemblance really to a live action character here. You see a design and a pattern of a pretty girl with expressing emotion.
I know you, I know what you'll do. You'll love me at once, the way you did once upon a dream.
For his design of the evil Queen Maleficent, Marc found his inspiration sitting on his own bookshelf.
I keep quite a large art library at home here, and I had a book I think was printed in Czechoslovakia on art of the Middle Ages in some place, and there was a painting, a religious painting, and it was a character had on this black robe, and there was this pattern of material, and it looked like flames, and that intrigued me. So I used that as a part of it. And then with the collar and the points on there, it was kind of trying to get a bat look to her. And of course the horns, just because it's kind of the devil image. So she frightened everybody to half to death.
The voice of Maleficent, Eleanor Audley, provided Marc with strength and scale for this powerful villainess.
With Eleanor Audley in Maleficent, you have something that suggests majesty and power. And, if you think of kind of the cackling old witch type thing, then all of a sudden you're bending a character over and you've got something different. But you take this monumental voice that she had, and immediately you're saying, this is big, this is an enormously impressive voice.
You poor simple fools, thinking you could defeat me, the mistress of all evil. Well, here's your precious princess.
One of the most fun assignments I've ever had in the studio was doing the villainess in 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil. She was a funny villainess, and while what she was doing wasn't very nice, she herself was an entertaining character. There were certain personality traits that she had. You never could get her to listen to anything. I know several such people. They do all the talking, and never listen. And we all know people of that sort.
Now listen, you idiots. I'll be back first thing in the morning. And the job better be done or I'll call the police. Do you understand?
With the completion of Cruella de Vil, Marc was ready to tackle something new, and Walt Disney had just the thing, the 1964 New York World's Fair. Marc now found himself designing cavemen, a time-traveling family, the children of the world, and our 16th president, all in 3 dimensions.
This was limited in that, to the degree that you had characters with their feet nailed to the floor, practically. So you had to figure out something for them to do that was believable. Walt was a great admirer of Abraham Lincoln. This is, I believe I remember him saying that even as a youngster he had portrayed Abraham Lincoln at his school on a Lincoln birthday or something of the sort. So Walt asked me to give it some thought, and I did a number of things of how simple things work in anatomy, how perhaps a mechanical hand could work. This was rather naive in thinking, because really our problem was not to create a mechanical man, but was rather to create an illusion. Mr. Lincoln would have to rise from a seated position, move one leg forward, and then put himself up into a standing position. We had great technical difficulties in getting the character to move properly in New York, and God, it would be going great, and then all of a sudden he would do a great jerk or decide to sit down. So anyway, it was a very difficult period of time, and we were about 2 weeks late getting Mr. Lincoln to operate. Walt was very nervous. We all were very nervous.
The day finally came for Mr. Lincoln's first performance.
By golly, Mr. Lincoln went all the way through. Matter of fact, we were so successful with this in illusion that the reviewer, I think for the New York Times, saw it and explained how Mr. Lincoln stood up and walked forward on the stage and gave his address. So the illusion was pretty good.
What constitutes the bulwark of our liberty and independence? It is not our frowning battlements, our bristling seacoasts. These are not our reliance against tyranny.
After the World's Fair, the 4 Disney attractions made the move to Disneyland, and Marc went with them.
When I started working down there was nothing that was funny in any of the attractions that I can recollect. And this was the thing all the way through that I have tried to do, is to bring in humor. I did a redo of the Jungle River ride, and I added the elephant pool and the trap safari and that sort of thing to that. And I think that trap safari was probably the first laugh that Disneyland had an attraction.
Each new Disneyland attraction opened another dimension to Marc's art and earned him some good advice from Walt Disney.
Walt said he wanted to do a pirate ride. We did a model of the attraction, and Walt saw all of that, and then we started building figures. But Walt was afraid, well, we're going to see this pretty close. Well, when you're moving, like in a boat, you don't see things that way. You're moving along, you see something here, you see something there, you're always looking forward. So the highly developed auctioneer figure that we put in there really was quite unnecessary. And I said this to him. He said, hey, look, Marc. He said, that's great. He said, we get so much repeat business here. He said, that means each time we come down, we'll see something that we didn't see before.
Strike your colors, you bloomin' cockroaches! Cries thunder, we'll see you to Davy Jones!
Walt never got to see the Pirates of the Caribbean completed.
About 2 weeks before Walt died, he came into my office and sat down. He just wanted to talk. Matter of fact, in that chair in there, as a matter of fact. And he saw these drawings on the wall, and he laughed like hell. He looked very bad. Anyway, we went out and had a meeting on a little thing that we were doing, came back in, and then he walked down the hall and said goodbye. And I never saw him after that. He never said goodbye to anybody in his life. He said, well, I'll see you next week or something. But anyway, probably the last laugh he had was these bear drawings.
By the mid-'60s, Marc was one of the mainstays at WED, where Disneyland attractions are created. His designs are the foundation of the Country Bear Jamboree, the Haunted Mansion, and for the last job before his retirement, America Sings. And although these projects were completed without Walt Disney, Marc always remembered the best piece of advice his boss ever gave him.
I remember one time I had a talk with Walt, and this was up in his office, and I said, you know, there's two ways you could do this, an expensive way and an inexpensive way. And he says, no. He said, Marc, I don't agree with that. He says, I think when you do something and you do it well enough, the public's going to pay you back for it. And I think when other people understand that, I think you can do anything.
As an artist, Marc Davis could do anything. Story sketches, animation, Disneyland designs. He was an artist's artist whose talent was a cornerstone of Disney's world. It was his fellow artists at Disney who presented him with the most cherished memento of his career. It sits in his home, situated honorably between priceless pieces of New Guinea art.
A marvelous gift by not the company, not executives, but by the people that did things with me. And I think that's the highest compliment you could ever have.